want to say one thing. Her book is um, she's not the fallen star, she's a rising star. So a big hand for Aishwarya, please.
Thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I won't wish to speak about writing more than the book itself. I remember Arundhati Roy once saying that about her first book, the What Are Small Gods, The God of Small Things, that if I didn't write this book, I'd go mad. Okay? So now, the first book, yours is the first book. A first book for a writer is hell, it's purgatory, it is bliss, it is freedom. It's like something no writer or no person has ever known before. How is it for you?
I think it's been all of those things at different times. I feel writing the book wasn't so tortuous because the story sort of came to me. I had this moment of inspiration and I wrote a poem about it, which about the pivotal scene in the book. And then the story sort of stayed with me and unfolded over the years. And it was very compelling, like Arundhati said, that it's something that I felt like I was an instrument and I had to get it out there. But the process of publishing and trying to get published is, of course, very brutal. It can be very soul-crushing. And even after that, because with your first book, you don't know what to expect. You don't know what is normal, what is not normal, and you're sort of floundering a lot of the time. So whenever anyone asks me, how has the experience been, I always say it's been a roller coaster. Some days I wake up thinking, wow, it's amazing. The book is a big hit. Everyone loves it. And other days I'm just like, no, it's such a flop. No one likes it.
So it was like a jump into an abyss, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Into the unknown.
All right. For the benefit of some of the people who may not have read the book, would you like to give a small précis of the story to them?
Certainly. So The Scent of Fallen Stars is a dual timeline novel. It's set in Delhi between 1995 and 2018. And it's about two different people who come here at these two different times from England, and what they find here, what happens to them, how it changes them, and how it changes their relationships with each other as well. And it's my ode to Delhi in many ways, because I grew up in this city. I have a lot of nostalgia for the 90s in this city. And it's also like my ode to India. And it's been so interesting to hear so many esteemed people talking about India and the power of the written word, because I feel I really wanted with this book to show a different side of India, to show the diversity of India, the beauty of India, and all these wonderful things that are sort of woven into the fabric of our country, but which sometimes get eroded by a lot of maybe stereotypes or by this westernization of our culture and so many things. So it also touches on the relevance of ancient wisdom in today's times. And it's so interesting that we had Swamiji here from the Chinmay Mission. And my mother is a guru and she teaches Advaita Vedanta. So I've been very privileged to learn that and to spend a lot of time in spaces like that. And I really wanted to bring those alive through the book as well.
So your mother, that was the autobiographical accent to the book, I suppose.
She's my inspiration, definitely.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now tell me something. Both Will, who lands in the 90s? No, 80s, right?
Sorry?
Will, who comes from...
in the 90s,
yeah,
yes,
90s.
in 1995.
And Arya, who comes later.
In 2018, yes.
Yeah, but why England? Why do both of them come from England to India? I mean...
Well, I think England and India have a very old relationship. And I think a lot of people, especially someone like Will, when he came here in the 90s, as a British man, there's a lot of baggage that you come with, and there's that whole colonial hangover and all. And I think particularly then, there were many more stereotypes about our country that floated around, particularly in a place like England. So I wanted to introduce this character who came here and was completely out of his depth in many ways, out of the context of where he grew up and the world that he knew, and what he makes of this place and how he first approaches it like a bada sahab, like I'm coming to India and, like, oh, it's so noisy and dirty and congested. But then when he looks a little deeper, the beauty and the majesty that he finds in this country, and of course, this very enigmatic and incredible girl he meets, Leela, and how she completely turns his world upside down. So I felt that was the right way to introduce the country.
In fact, Will almost seems colorless compared to Leela. I'm not saying he is colorless, but he seems, especially towards the end when he, loses his job, leaves his job, and, it goes on like that. Was it a deliberate juxtaposition of gender?
Not a deliberate juxtaposition of gender, and I would argue with you that Will is stoic. I wouldn't say that he's colorless. He's mature, and of course he's going through something that.
I said comparatively colorless.
Sorry?
I said comparatively colorless.
And he's going through something that nothing in his life had prepared him for. But I think it was more about age and the contrast between someone like Will coming here in the 90s, he's in his 30s, he's already a little more mature in life, and then Arya, who's this young girl and who has a completely different perspective, because this is a land that she was born here, and she is half Indian, but she's never known this place. So I really wanted that contrast to come across, and also the contrast between the city, of course, in 1995 and 2018.
Let's talk about the process of writing. I found in your book, it's a very difficult thing I've done. A lot of the story is told through conversations. It's almost like a tapestry of conversations. And it's very difficult for someone to track it, but in your narrative is like, it's extremely kind of, clear. And it's a very difficult thing you've done, so I must congratulate you on that. But what I found fascinating, that's why I've got this thing in my hand, that as it's like driving a car at a particular speed, and then suddenly kind of, just taking off, and then again kind of, see. I just found this sentence fantastic. It says it's about, Arya's, how she experiences Delhi. It says she stood enthralled to an old fantasy that there were places where other worlds remained suspended in wisps in the atmosphere. Other worlds remained suspended in wisps in the atmosphere. It's almost like something haunting time. It's like haunting Delhi. But so tangible, she could almost see them, smell the scents, hear the melodies. I found this such a poetic departure from the conversational narrative, and again you kind of segue into your whole thing. So this whole I wouldn't call it a flight of fancy. I'd call it a flight of melody, if I could use the word, literary melody. So what is the process of your writing?
Well, I think a passage like the one that you read out, I think those are sort of thoughts that I've had very frequently, because I feel going around Delhi, you're always running into the past. And I'm a huge history buff, so I'm always interested in the textures, the colors, the sense and the sounds of the past, which I feel are always sort of simmering under the surface, which I also try to bring out in the book. But in terms of the process of writing this book, I wrote the two timelines separately. I wrote the 1995 timeline first, and then I had a long break in between because life got in the way. And in fact, it's my mother who would keep nudging me and saying, what about that book? What about that story? I want to know what happens next. You have to write the rest of it. And then eventually when COVID hit and we were all locked up in our houses, I felt, okay, I don't have any excuse now to not finish that story. So then I wrote the 2018 story. And then I sort of braided them together. But I think there's a lot of wisdom that goes around about writing, things that are helpful, whether it's writing every day, getting feedback from the right people, things like that. But a lot of it is also instinct, and a lot of people have asked me, why did you choose this dual timeline structure? And all I can say is, it felt right to me for the story. So hopefully that works and that, comes across to the readers.
Okay, thank you. But I'd again go back to it that I'm talking about the process of writing. You've written a book which is both, I could explain as both deep and charming. It's a difficult thing to pull out, but it's both deep and charming. Do you I mean, what is the process of your writing? That's what I mean. I mean, see, for example, some people kind of have an idea and they mull on it and they forget about it and kind of suddenly it comes up to them. Like some of them just start writing and suddenly characters start popping up which never existed before. Some people actually sit down, work out a plot. Like Vikram does that a lot. I mean, he's like very, very particular about kind of working on the plot and expanding it. So what is the process of writing? And if I could invite you to be a literary astrologer, where do you see yourself going?
Okay, so I think what you're referring to is basically being a plotter versus a pantser. And I think there's a bit of both. I lean more towards plotting my novels quite heavily. I knew exactly where I wanted this novel to begin, to end up, and of course what should happen in the middle. But having said that, a lot of the best scenes or the best characters and moments can only come during the process of writing. You can't plot everything, and there has to be some room for that creativity and imagination. So I would say it's a mix of both. I like to say I'm a plotter who's trying to be more of a pantser. And we'll see how that goes. And in terms of the future, I have already written my second manuscript, which is a Gothic fiction manuscript, so it's completely different from this. So let's see. I hope that it finds a good home, and maybe you'll be reading that and we'll be chatting about that someday.
I'd be very happy to. But why the switch?
Again, I think it's just about what story feels right in a particular moment. And it's funny because I really discovered this once after I had finished this manuscript for The Scent of Fallen Stars, and I was trying to get it published. And then I realized, oh God, this is absolutely not the kind of book that's trending these days, So it's hard to write to trends. I think as a writer, you just have to write what resonates with you. What is it that you want to say to the world at any point of time? And then if you're lucky, sooner or later, somebody will fall in love with it. And maybe if you're really, really lucky, someday there'll be a whole jury of people who will see the merit in it, and then it makes everything worthwhile.
No, I really like that. I really like the honesty of that. I really like the honesty of that. Going through so many books, and especially having read a lot of books over the last kind of 10, 15 years, I find either consciously or subconsciously, a lot of writers writing to get into OTT or a movie being made or, something like that. I find that you haven't done that. I find that you haven't done that, yet you pulled it off. Now, would you ever write a book with an aim to kind of, to be made into a movie? There's nothing wrong with it, by the way.
I think I do see my writing in a very cinematic way, when I'm writing it. So, of course, I think there's a lot of scope to adapt any book or anything into a movie or an OTT thing. I think if I was given a project, like, okay, specifically, please write this for this. I've done a lot of theater and I've done some short films and stuff, so I have some experience there. It would be interesting to do that as well. But I don't think I could write something if I was told, okay, this is the message that has to come across from the book and this is what we want you to write. Because I think whatever we write, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, it should be meaningful, and I think we have a responsibility as writers, as any kind of creative people, filmmakers, actors, whatever it is. We have a responsibility towards society because people are going to be, whether we like it or not, people do take things away from what they read and watch and all that. So I think we always have to keep that in mind.
You seriously believe that we have a responsibility to say?
Yes, absolutely.
Why do you do why do you believe so?
Because I think that, especially something like cinema, let's say, we can really see the impact that movies have had on society over the years. I mean, whether it's in terms of how people dress, how people think, how people behave, I think there is a connection between them. And there have been cases also, I don't remember which movie it was, maybe it was even Hannibal or something, where it's a very dark and twisted movie, and there have been real life incidents which have followed from that because somebody's gotten inspired by something. So I think we have a responsibility.
Okay, I was listening to my old colleague Neerja talking, and now we're talking. And she was talking about stories, like how important stories are. So whether it is a prime minister or a political leader doing particular things, he's a human being. I mean, he wears clothes, he smells, he bathes, he talks to people, but a lot of the conversations are not recorded, right? Now, when you write fiction, you're telling stories, but you're filling in the gaps, right? So, where does the reality and the imagination intersect? At which point do they intersect, and which point would you like to be in?
Well, I think that's a tough one. Where do reality and fiction intertwine for any author? I think with most authors, if you talk to them, you'll find there is so much of yourself in your book, even if you're writing something that's fiction.
I got a bad elbow, sorry.
You put so much of yourself in it because, whether it's a hero or a villain or, whatever it is, it's all about what you're trying to say to the world. I always say that writing is such a solitary enterprise, right? It's just you and your words. And when you publish something, it's like a message you're sending out there, to the universe. It's like, hello, is anyone there kind of thing. So it is you. It is all everything that you, maybe everything that's shaped you. And I think that's different at different times also. Like you asked me why is my next book so different from this one? Maybe because I was in a different frame of mind, and today I can't write that book. Maybe I would write a completely different book. So I think there's a big connection. And yes, I think life is all about the stories that we tell, whether we write them or not, and most of all the stories that we tell to ourselves, about ourselves. So truth is definitely stranger than fiction.
You said you do lots of things. You said you write books, you're a filmmaker, you sing.
I'm not a filmmaker, but I used to do a lot of theater, and then we did a few short films also. Yeah.
So there comes a point in a person's life, and usually talented people do a lot of things. They like to kind of, multitask, as they say. At one given point of time, they say, oh, this is I. This is me. I didn't really figure it out. I wasn't really consciously looking at it. Have you reached that point? Do you define yourself as a writer? Do you define yourself? What do you define yourself as?
I think I've always known that more than anything else, I love to write, and that's what I feel that I'm best at. When I used to do theater, and I used to act also, and then sometimes, I got a couple of, not like this, but I got a couple of awards for acting and things, and since then, people have also come to me and said, why don't you do plays anymore? Why don't you act? But I've always known that for me, it's writing. That's where I feel most like myself, maybe, and that's where I feel I can express myself best. It's through writing. And I always knew this since I was a child. I wanted to do lots of different things, but I always felt like no matter what else I do or don't do, I'm going to write. Someday I'm going to have a book in one of those lovely bookstores with the wooden floors and the smell of books and varnish, and it's going to be there.
Well, that's an old Delhi you describe. I mean, you're a Delhi girl, and Delhi is really a sea of stories. Are you, is your other books going to have a lot of Delhi in them?
No, actually, the second one is set in a fictional mountain town in the Himalayas. So I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time in the Himalayas also because of my mother. And so for the next one, I decided to create this mountain town of my own, and I was able to take elements from the different mountain towns that I've spent time in, whether it's Mussoorie or Simla or Landor, Dharamshala, Manali. And it was a lot of fun to create the whole mythology and the story of a totally fictional town.
So the mythology of you, is it shades of your mother in Leela or the other way around?
Sorry?
Are there shades of your mother in Leela or the other way around?
I think there are definitely, I guess, like Leela has always been tuned to a different frequency. My mother's definitely always been completely different from anyone else. And I mean, it's not that the character is literally based on her, but she's definitely my inspiration.
People tell me that writers are always looking for something, but I believe that everybody is looking for something, What are you looking for?
I'm just hoping that the books I write will find the readers that they're meant to find, and that maybe, like it is for me, when I've read the books that have, would you like some water?
Yeah. Thank you.
That when I've read the books that have made such an impact on me, and I've come across a passage or a story where I've really felt like, wow, this is something that I can feel deep in my heart. I guess I would want my books to find readers who feel that way about them.
How do you respond to poetry? How do you respond to poetry?
Respond to poetry? I love poetry. I used to write a lot of poetry as well. In fact, The Scent of Fallen Stars, I first wrote it as a poem, just that pivotal scene where Will meets Leela, because that is the scene that came to me and was the catalyst for this whole story. So I had written a poem called Molsari, and I thought...
You remember that?
I don't remember the whole poem, no.
Okay,
I just remember the title and a few lines here and there.
Okay, tell me those lines.
I just remember the refrain, which was, she came to me like the Molsari, and then there was different lines that followed and came before that. So yeah, and I think there is a lot of poetry in the book also. Delhi is a city of poets. So I think poetry can sometimes say even more than a full-length novel.
Sorry, I've got a bad arm suddenly. No, because why I asked you is that I found this image quite compelling. You compare, an evening in Delhi. I mean, I can't imagine where it is, but I can guess. A distended sun turning corroded railway tracks into the wealth of kings. I mean, where do you get an image like that? That's kind of awesome. Which means you are seeing aesthetics in parts of what's around you and interpreting it as how you think it should be, or how others think they should see it as.
I think we always have to find the beauty of life, right? We always have to find the beauty of wherever we are. And I think Delhi is a city which can be very challenging to love. It's very infuriating.
I love it.
I know, so do I. And, it has a lot of minuses. So I think you really have to look and scratch under the surface to find the beauty in this city, which is definitely there, like the passage that you're talking about and the sunsets in the monsoons, which are which are completely different from what's on the ground, and the congestion and the chaos on the ground. So I think you always have to look, and there'll always be something.
Well, I hope we'll be able to show more of it to people. I can see Vidya, looking very restless about this. So maybe we should continue our conversation later. And it's really been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you.
And
and thank you all. Thank you to the New Indian Express, to the jury. It's a great honor.
All the best for your book. All the best.